book of Acts, for me, is probably one of the most interesting books of the entire Bible. First, because it is the only book in the entire New Testament where we get to read and see and experience how the apostles carried out the commands of Christ to preach the gospel. We see how the church started, how it grew, some of the problems that it went into. We read even some of the conflicts between some of the apostles. What happens when people walk in the flesh or they walk in the spirit, and when it's a book like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then the book of Acts. Those books are written to the general public. Luke, who wrote the book of Acts and the book of the Gospel according to Luke, both of those books were written to a guy named Theophilus. The others were not written to any one specific person, so they are to the general public, which is different because most of the New Testament, from the book of Romans all the way through the last book, the Revelation of Jesus Christ, every one of those books is either written to an individual believer or to a church in a city, or to a group of churches, or to churches in an area, or to a group of believers. In every case, all of them have been born again. They've all heard the same gospel. They've all received it. They've all been baptized the same way. They understand the whole process of being born again. They understand that, which is recorded in the book of Acts. And the book of Acts serves as a bridge between the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. Then we have the book of Acts, and then we have letters to the churches, letters to believers. And so you kind of go through this gate, if you will. Acts is like a gate. Go through the gate into the rest of the instruction on living a Christian life. The commands and instructions to churches and individual believers, as I said. But the book of Acts, for its importance, for its foundational nature, unfortunately, over the years, I've heard so few references to it. Very few times do preachers use it, particularly in presenting the gospel. And the interesting thing about that is that even Jesus said in John chapter 17, he said that we would believe on him through their word, through the words of the apostles. So it's critical, in my opinion, that we go back to the book of Acts to see things like how did they preach the gospel? What was included? What was not included? What words did they use? How did people respond? How did the apostles what kind of commands did they make? And so we go to the book of Acts to find that, because there's no other book in the entire New Testament that gives out that New Testament gospel preached under the New Testament. See, the New Testament begins at Matthew 1:1 if we actually look at our Bibles, but the time of the New Testament does not begin until the death of Jesus Christ. It's the New Testament, like a last will and testament. And so testaments are not in effect until that person dies. Well, Jesus doesn't die at Matthew 1:1. He dies towards the end of all the Gospels. His death ushers in the New Testament. And the first time the gospel is ever preached in the New Testament is by Peter in Acts chapter 2. And we see that the gospel in the book of Acts was preached the same way every time, whether that's Acts chapter 2 or 8 or 10 or 16 or 19. Every single time the gospel is presented, it is presented the same way, whoever did it. Whether Peter did it, Philip did it, Paul did it, Silas, they all preached the same gospel. And so the importance there is for us to go back to the book of Acts to find out how they preached it, to find out how people responded. And that's one of the things I love about the book of Acts, is because we actually have that recorded. And it's our pattern. It is our blueprint for how we should preach the gospel today. And so I hope you'll join me into this journey into the book of Acts. And we'll probably start at the very end of the book of Luke, because book of Luke and the book of Acts, they dovetail. They in fact, they even overlap at the exact same point. And so we'll kind of pick it up from there. But we'll go through all 28 chapters, little bits at a time. And I'm reading from the King James Version. I hope you will too. Join me, read it. Let's read it together. And then below this video, you'll have an opportunity to leave a comment. Let's get a dialogue going. Let's talk about what we've read, what we're digging into, and really grasp this great book. One more final point. The Bible, all Scripture was written, given by inspiration of God. He moved on holy men as they spake, and he gave them dictation. So no matter whose name is on it, whether it's the Gospel according to Luke or Acts of the Apostles, whatever, let's take comfort in knowing that it was God who oversaw the writing of his book, overwriting of his book. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and it's not of any private interpretation. In other words, it's not Paul's opinion, it's not Peter's opinion, unless it's specifically stated in there. But the Scriptures were given to us by God, regardless of who he used to write it and compile it. And he gave it for us for our instruction, for our knowledge, for our reproof, and for us to be more like him and to have a final authority go back to in all matters of life, doctrine, how to live, and whatnot. So anyway, let's take the book of Acts. We'll dig into it, have some fun with it. And this is just kind of an introduction. So the next time we meet for Acts chapter 1, bring your King James Bible. Let's read together. Let's talk about it. And let's grow in Jesus and have a good time doing it. Thank you. Let's go to Acts chapter 1 now.